scripture today leads us a little further into the public ministry of Jesus. Today he's sharing a reflection on his own times. We'll be reading this responsibly. I invite you to read it out together, the words in white, as I read the words in yellow. Jesus went on to say, "To what then can I compare the people of this generation? What are they like?
They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other, 'We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not cry.'"
For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon.
The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, "Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners."
But wisdom is proved right by all her children. So as I've been reading through Luke, some passages catch your attention and others are interested. Some kind of call out to say, it's time to talk about me now. So as I was looking through these early chapters of Luke, just following along, as we say, following Jesus as he emerges into public ministry, this passage caught my attention because it seems so contemporary. By Jesus' comment, what shall we say about this generation? In the age of social media, there is an enormous conversation, if you want to call it that, about generations. You got the greatest generation and the baby boomers and the Gen Xers and the Gen Ys and now the Gen Zs, all of them with their own particular characteristics, and all of them taking shots at each other. I just don't know what's wrong with people in this generation. It's usually a comment by an older generation about the latest generation. But as we hear Jesus speak about it, he's not talking about what's wrong with these kids these days. He's saying, what shall we say about these people who seem to think that it's their job to run our society? Right out of the 60s, let's talk about the establishment. Let's talk about the man. Let's talk about what's going on in our culture. Generational differences certainly are far from new. And I like to say that there's at least some truth to what I'm just about to say. Because as I look back over the past 80 years or so, and particularly with an eye or an ear to music, you do realize, don't you, that in the early 1930s, there were parents and grandparents seriously upset and worried because their kids were listening to the provocative music of this crooner named Crosby. What's wrong with these kids? I just can't believe what they're listening to. By the end of the 30s, merging into the 40s, parents and grandparents were upset because their kids were listening to this hot jazz by people like Benny Goodman. Fights in the household over musical Sinatra guy. What's wrong with these kids today? Next thing you know, it's Elvis Presley. Public demonstrations against the music and the performances of Elvis Presley. So much difference of opinion. Next, the parents and the grandparents are telling us not only does this music by the Beatles stink, but they all need a haircut. The 60s grow into more expressive, more explicit language. The 70s emerge, which is my home for music. Most of the music that's near and dear to me came out of the 70s. And so it becomes my reference point, it becomes my teacher. And I realize that sometimes we love the music we love because of the tempo and the style and the instrumentation and the lyric. And sometimes we love it just because of the nostalgia. Just because I hear that song and I'm 17 again. If only for a moment, as long as I don't try to do anything physical, I can pretend I'm 17 again. Traditional churches, most of their traditional hymns were written before Bing Crosby. Most of the power is in nostalgia because it makes me feel like I'm home. It makes me feel like I'm in church. It makes me feel like I'm in a familiar, comfortable place. By the time I was 20, I was already railing against the next generation of music when disco emerged. And it was the most god-awful thing I've ever heard. Then you go into new wave, then you go into punk, then you go into rap, and you get into a variety of expressions beyond that. And parents and grandparents were confident that Eminem was the ruin of the civilization. Differences over music. Every 7 or 8 years, a generation is born. And clearly, the music wars beginning somewhere in the 60s merged into the life of the church. I had seen this passage and I'd come up with this title, Generational Combat, early this past week. And so it was just a godsend that right in the middle of the week, it becomes local TV news in Evansville that the elders at Crossroads Christian Church fired its minister and fired the teaching pastor because he supported the senior minister. Now, I have to tell you, the first thing I thought was TV stations could care less about the good work that churches do and the sacrifice it takes to be a church. But they fire somebody and suddenly it's in the news. But of course it was already on Facebook. It was already being tweeted around. And people were reacting. A congregation of 3,500 discovering on local news that their minister was fired. That had to be a good experience. People rebelling. Well, I thought we all had to hire. We all hired him. How come we all don't get to decide whether he stays or goes? And you get into polity. My daughter lives in Dayton, Ohio, but knows some people grad students living in Evansville who were on Facebook. So next thing I know, she's texting me, hey, what's this thing going on at Crossroads? It gets out there real fast. And we have that debate. Can you imagine 3,500 people deciding whether to fire somebody? I can't. I mean, just close the church down because the fight's going to be so ugly and fierce that it's going to devastate us for a while. So maybe the elders knew what they were doing. But the information that has been shared, right, and they say they're going to talk to the congregation over this weekend and then maybe we'll learn more. But they said it wasn't because of any moral failure. It was a difference in philosophy, they said. More and more comes out, and they say what to me is still the oddest phrase. I haven't figured it out yet. But that apparently the majority of the elders thought that the new minister was both too progressive and too evangelical. And I'm trying to figure out how can you be both? And hopefully maybe I'll find out what do you mean by that. But then what really comes out is, well, we think that the church needs to leave these live bands behind and go back to choirs. We think we want to bring back some programs that we used to do decades ago. We want to go backward to whatever it is that we think is right. Generational combat. I can remember, maybe you guys, I don't know how connected you guys are with Evansville, but I can remember when it was calling having a Christian church. Not too far from Barnes and Noble, close to Red Lobster, which is even better. And Cullen Avenue Christian Church, we here made this big, bold decision. We're going to go out to the edge of town, actually just the county line there. And we're going to build a new building, and we've been growing, and we think that we can just really emerge and become a major growing church. And they move out there and they call themselves Crossroads. I don't know why, because they're not really at a crossroads. But everybody gets to call themselves what they want to call themselves. And then, and you hear about them, and they become virtually a legend. I'm sure the myth is bigger than the church. But it's all about their contemporary. It's all about the live music, the bands. I don't know when they started it, but that was the character. That was the thing that made them grow. And they've been growing in these recent years too, I'm sure. But you know as well as I do, you can never please everybody. And perhaps you know as well as I do that people reach a point where they're tired of being progressive and changing and adapting to new generations, and they want to go back to something that just makes them feel at home. Perfectly normal and natural. The thing that really confounds me is a church that size should be able to do just about anything it wants to do. It doesn't have to be an either or. But I must be wrong. It's hard to please more than one generation at a time. It's hard to please one generation at a time. And as Jesus emerges into public ministry, the thing he notices about the generation in charge is that they seem to think all they have to do is play a tune and people will dance. That they get to set the mood and people will just simply fall into place. They'll do what we want, when we want, the way we want it. And I'm sure that most of us have some of that within us, right? I think they ought to live their lives, this world would be a much better place. If everybody in my household would simply live the way I want them to live. Everybody in my church, if everybody in my community, if everybody would just, live the way I think they ought to live, life would be so much simpler and everything would go well. And I don't know whether, I think when I first became active as a minister in the church, I imagined that people all had the same idea of what it meant to be church. I thought, well, everybody's going to get along, everybody's going to agree, everybody's going to be kind and nice and thoughtful, everybody's going to love each other. Then you discover that you're living in the real world and people are people and those things, that reality doesn't exist. And you find out what the challenge to church is. Dealing with generational differences, dealing with individual preferences, dealing with very deep-seated preferences for faith and expression and worship, deep felt ideas of what it means to be church, about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, about why we're here or why we're not here. Conflict about music and styles and instruments and what we say about this and what we do about that. Jesus seemed to indicate, I would think by comparison, that we're not going to be like this generation. We're not here to call the shots, to expect everybody to just comply and to dance when we tell them to dance and to grieve when we play a dirge. He must have something else in mind, and it has to do with this mission of his. I'm here to set people free. I'm here to embrace them for who they are. I'm here to accept them. To pronounce this year of Jubilee, this brand new start for everybody. I hear him saying, I'm here to create a faith movement where we welcome all, and all means all. We're here to build a faith movement where we don't tell people what they need and give them what we want to give them, but we discover from them what they need and respond to their needs and let them be themselves and tell us how to serve them. We're here to build a faith movement that climbs down off of some self-made pedestal and walks among people. That somehow frees ourselves from this self-imposed concept of the way people ought to be and learns to love people for the way they actually are. It's no wonder it's been hard, and it's no wonder it's so divisive, and it's no wonder there are so many congregations. And no matter how many you have, there's always a new one popping up here and a new one merging there, and this church splitting here. Learning how to love people for who they are. Learning how to accept them because they're children of God. Learning how to avoid this tendency to just try to want to control everything. We're still learning how. We're still trying to figure it out. In the face of all the things that could divide us, we're still trying to hold hands and walk together in ministry. So no matter how long you've been active in the church, of how you express your spirituality, no matter how hard you've worked to support the ministries and activities of the church, no matter how deeply you've reached into your own resources and contributed. Each and every Sunday when we gather, each and every week, it's a new beginning. We're just starting. And it's just going to get harder. Because loving others as we love ourselves is the hardest thing that you can possibly do. Learning how to let go of trying to control and manipulate and coerce and criticize and complain about others is one of the hardest things that we ever have to do. And every time we grow a little bit, we just discover there's more growth yet to come. Every time we overcome one challenge, there's just another one waiting for us. And if you're in a place where you can be excited about that, where you can welcome the challenge, when you're eager to see what God can still do with our hearts and our minds and our congregation and our ministry, if you're longing to see us become even more loving, even more accepting, even more welcoming, then this is an exciting time. It's just not going to be an easy one. Let us pray. We appreciate, oh God, the depth of your love and the patience you have for your children in every time and every place. Imagining how difficult it is to work with people who have made up their minds and who know better than you. But you are patient with us, and you're loving, and you teach us, and you show us, and you help us learn together to listen more carefully to your guidance, to look more completely at the example set for us by Christ, to learn from the mistakes of ages past, and to seek new ways of being your children. We are grateful, O God, that you've devoted so much to us, and we offer you our lives in return. Through Christ our Lord.